This episode is brought to you by The Build, a new podcast from the guys behind Sincera, Mike O'Sullivan and Ian Myers. They built their company by figuring out clever solutions to a few important ad tech problems in their industry. And that's exactly what this show is about. Mike and Ian interview some of the smartest tech minds in the biz to hear about how they identified opportunities, solved their hardest challenges, and grew their businesses in the process. Listen to The Build with Mike O'Sullivan wherever you get your podcasts.
In order to build a tax engine, which is essentially adding applicable tax to a transaction, you need to know in depth each jurisdiction that you support, right? Some jurisdictions tax certain products, some of them don't tax other products, they have special rates, etc. And so traditionally the incumbents use these massive teams. And so it's just a huge human intensive process, very prone to error, as you might expect. And it's an inhibitor to growth. It's a big reason why these incumbents didn't expand. And so our take, Sphere's take, and what I built when I first joined was what eventually we would call TRAM, which is the tax review and assessment model. Hi, I'm Alex Bowcut. I'm the head of engineering at Sphere.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries.
Spent 6 months moonlighting.
There's nothing on the back end.
Who share what it takes to change an industry.
I don't exactly know what to do
took
next.
many goes to get right.
Who built the teams that have their back.
Our company is its people.
The teams help each other achieve
Most
more.
proud of our team.
Keeping scalability top of mind.
All that infrastructure was
Yes, we've been fighting it as we grow.
Total waste of time.
The stories you don't read in the headlines.
It's not an easy thing to achieve, mind
Took it
you.
off the shelf and dusted it off and tried it again.
To ride the ups and downs of the startup life.
You need to really want it.
It's not just about technology.
All this and more on Code Story.
I'm your host, Noah Lappart, and today how Alex Bowcut is building the only AI native tax engine, enabling end-to-end compliance automation across the world. Today's episode is brought to you by .tech domains, and this one hits close to home. Back in 2016, I was building my startup and went hunting for that perfect .com and found next to nothing. So I did what every founder does, settled. Here's what I wish someone had told me. You're building a tech startup, just get a .tech domain. It instantly tells investors and customers what you're about. Don't overthink it. Secure your .tech domain today from any registrar of your choice. This episode is sponsored by Unblocked. Unblocked is the context layer your agents are missing. It synthesizes your PRs, docs, Slack, and tickets into organizational context that agents actually understand. So they make better plans, write higher quality code, use fewer tokens, and require fewer correction loops. If you're running Claude Code, Cursor, or any agentic workflow, Unblocked is worth a look. Learn more at getunblocked.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Mesmo. If your team is collecting large volumes of logs, metrics, and traces, but still struggling to get timely answers, Mesmo can help. Mesmo is an active telemetry platform that processes and enriches observability data in real time before it's stored or analyzed. That means lower data volume, lower cost, and faster root cause analysis across your existing observability tools. To see how it works, get a demo at mesmo.com/codestory. That's MEZMO.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by BrainGrid. If you are building with AI coding tools, but your features keep breaking, you need to check out BrainGrid. It is the product management agent for AI builders. BrainGrid turns messy ideas into clear specs, tasks, and prompts that coding agents like Cursor and Claude can actually build the right way. Ship real software, not fragile prototypes. Start free at braingrid.ai. Alex Bowcut is from Salt Lake City, Utah, originally, but has been in the Bay Area for the last 4 years. He's always been interested in computers and was in middle school when smartphones were blooming. He took part in jailbreaking gadgets and such, and all of these things led to the natural interest in computer science and mathematics, and eventually startups. Outside of tech, he is married with 2 Australian shepherds. He and his wife enjoy hiking with the dogs and skiing, unfortunately, without the dogs. Alex was approached by the founder of his current venture. He was approached while he was working at another startup to tackle the creation of AI control and scaling within the company internally. When he joined, he immediately started changing the game and creating the initial version of their assessment model, TRAM. This is Alex's creation story at Sphere.
Sphere is a global revenue-based compliance engine. So any sort of revenue-based compliance, that's what we're interested in working on. And the first and most obvious one of those is indirect tax, which is called sales tax in the US and called VAT, GST internationally. And so Sphere is in the business of supporting, as a software, some of the biggest customers, some of the biggest companies, I should say, that are growing in the AI space. Folks like Lovable, Replit, Windsurf, 11 Labs, all of these folks use Sphere as a solution for their sales tax needs. So of course, companies need to collect sales tax from their customers. They need to eventually pay that money. They don't get to keep it, unfortunately. Eventually, they need to pay that money to the tax authorities. And so Sphere is a solution that makes it very easy to do that, not just in the US states. So there's a few different solutions on the market already that have good support domestically for the US, but Sphere focuses internationally. So we do support the US as well. That's kind of table stakes now. We focus on how can we be a one-stop shop for all of our customers, whether they're selling in the United States, Australia, Japan, Uzbekistan, you name it, we want to support it. Nick, the founder, Nick Rudder, he's a single founder and a solo founder. And he reached out to me right when he was pivoting an old business into what would become Sphere. And he just found me on LinkedIn, small world in San Francisco, small but not so small. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. I was at a different startup at the time working on it. And Nick he's an incredible founder. And I think I have a pretty decent eye for founders. I've worked with a number of them and seen a lot of them in action. And from our first conversation, I could tell that he had the makeup of what makes a founder great. And I really bought in on this vision that he had. Despite it being very early, he had a couple contracted engineers that were working on the proof of concept of what would become Sphere. So it was quite early, but I really bought into the vision of what he saw and the hole in the market internationally. I was kind of all in from the first conversation.
So this will be interesting. I typically ask about the MVP for a product, right? I typically interview the founders themselves a lot. Being head of engineering, what was your MVP when you joined the company? What was that first project you jumped in and took over, ran with, and what sort of tools were you using to build it, and how long did it take you to bring it to life?
I was hired originally to focus on our AI features. So Sphere has a bunch of AI features that we've built that are internal features for our tax researchers. If we back up just to set the stage for 1 second on how traditionally the incumbents in our space have gone about solving some of the problems that we've solved with AI. So in order to build a tax engine, which is essentially adding applicable tax to a transaction, you need to know in depth each jurisdiction that you support, right? Some jurisdictions tax certain products, some of them don't tax other products, they have special rates, etc. And so traditionally, the incumbents use these massive teams of human tax researchers, essentially tax lawyers, to go through the legislation in Alabama, for example, right? And understand the legislation and then fill out these big matrices in Excel of what's taxable in Alabama, at what rate. And so it's just a huge human intensive process, very prone to error, as you might expect. And it's an inhibitor to growth. It's a big reason why these incumbents didn't expand internationally from the beginning or later on. It's very difficult to scale these huge teams of lawyers. This probably isn't a huge surprise. And so our take, Sphere's take, and what I built when I first joined was what eventually we would call TRAM, which is the tax review and assessment model, which essentially acts as like an analyst under our human tax researchers, which we do still have some human tax researchers. And it makes a first pass at these determinations is what they're called. But what is taxable in this jurisdiction? What's not taxable? What are the rates? So the AI makes a first pass at these determinations, and then we allow, the human expert goes in and reviews them for correctness and makes changes where necessary. So this was the first thing that I came in to build, was this first version from conversations that Nick and I had as I was getting ready to join and then joining, of how we could enable our human tax researchers, who at the time we had one contractor, how could we enable them to move way more quickly than they were moving in other places, and also allow them to work in other languages, for example, right? Legislation in Japan is not written in English, as an example. And so this was the first thing that I worked on. And I think it was a great first project and a great first thing to build up from an MVP perspective, because it had such a clear metric of success. So the game is all about accuracy, right? How accurate can this system be? How often are the human experts having to make changes?
I'm curious about, in that, maybe a decision or trade-off you had to make in building that and really establishing the TRAM, right? I'm curious about, maybe it's around approach, and I hear you saying that it was very clear, it was a very clear metric there, but I'm curious about a decision or trade-off you had to make and how you coped with it.
I think maybe the biggest trade-off we had to make at the beginning was a laser focus on a particular type of product. So it's very difficult we didn't want to try and boil the ocean and go after physical goods, which gets very complicated with like grocery items, for example. So at the beginning, I think the first thing that we did is we really wanted to focus on digital services, right? Electronic services, specifically SaaS. So I think that was the biggest thing from the beginning. That was a trade-off that we made. And that was a decision that we made at the beginning, that we wanted to focus on SaaS. We wanted to get SaaS right. SaaS is notoriously difficult from a sales tax perspective in the US and to some extent internationally. And so we really wanted to focus on SaaS at the beginning, and we broke it down, as granular as we could get. So really focused on a certain type of product. How can we iterate quickly on TRAM, get feedback from our human experts, and trying to do that across a lot of different products is going to be very difficult. So I think that was the main trade-off that we took from like a business perspective going into TRAM. I think from a technical perspective, there are many trade-offs from an architecture perspective that I think I made out of wanting to move quickly. So building systems that were very agile and maybe wouldn't scale to 1 billion determinations or something like this, but we wanted to be able to iterate really quickly, take the feedback from our human experts, put it into the system. And so those were the technical trade-offs I was making, were around speed over trying to build the ultimate scalable system for this or something like that from the very beginning.
Today's episode is brought to you by .tech domains, and this one hits close to home. Back in 2016, when I was building my own tech startup, I went on the hunt for that elusive .com. Looked high, looked low, and guess what I found? Nothing. What I did find cost me an arm and a leg. So I did what every founder does under pressure. Threw in extra letters, settled for the less than optimal name. And here's what I wish someone had said to me back then. Noah, you're building a tech startup. Just get a .tech domain. Tech startup, .tech domain. It could not be more obvious. It tells investors, customers, and anyone who looks at your website, really, that tech is at the core of your build. And I've kicked myself plenty since, especially when I see the clean and sharp names tech companies have landed on .tech. Nothing.tech, 1x.tech, Aurora.tech, CES.tech, Ultra.tech, Alice.tech, Neon.tech, Blaze.tech, Pi.tech. You get the idea. So take it from someone who learned it the hard way. If you're building a tech startup, don't overthink it. Secure your .tech domain today from any registrar of your choice. This episode is brought to you by The Build, a new podcast from the guys behind Sincera, Mike O'Sullivan and Ian Myers. They built their company by figuring out clever solutions to a few important ad tech problems in the industry, and that's exactly what this show is about. Mike and Ian interview some of the smartest tech minds at Magnite, Chalice, DoubleClick, and LiveRamp to hear about how they identified opportunities, solved their hardest challenges, and grew their businesses in the process. This show is for you if you've had some of these breakthrough moments yourself, or if you're seeking inspiration for the next one. Listen to The Build with Mike O'Sullivan wherever you get your podcasts. So you've got the MVP of that working. How have you progressed and matured that? And I think to wrap it in a box a little bit, and this is kind of in general for the company too, how do you build roadmaps? How do you go about deciding that, okay, this is the next most important thing to build or to address with Sphere?
That's a great question. And I think Sphere's approach here is a big reason for its success that we've had over the last couple of years and the growth trajectory that we've been on. We work very closely with our customers. We have Slack channels with all of them. We're very in tune with what they need on the tax side of things or on the revenue compliance side of things. So the way that we set roadmaps, the way that we decide what's going to be prioritized is very much influenced by the customers that we have. And I think that's served us well from the beginning. Tax is obviously a very complicated space. It's obviously regulated, and there's certainly very low margin for inaccuracy. We need to be very accurate. And so we can't, like I said a minute ago, we can't boil the ocean. So we set these roadmaps based on what do our customers, our current ones, and maybe some that are in the pipeline that we think are close to maybe signing. What do they need? How can we support them? And how can we support them in a way that's the way they want to be supported, something that's hands-off for them? And so we're in a bit of a spot where part of what drives our roadmap as well are legislations all over the world, right? There's legislations that meet and they make rules around indirect tax, and then we have to be ready, agile enough to adjust to that. Sphere, I think, has a unique road mapping setup where we're considering what our customers want, but we also need to consider there's upcoming regulation changes in Brazil, for example. So can we set things up so that we're ready for those regulation changes in Brazil? And there's a never-ending list of these sorts of things. So it's an interesting mix of customer needs and geopolitical happenings around the world.
What about team? I'm curious about team and how your team and how the company approaches building teams, and what do you look for in those people to indicate that they are the winning horses to join you?
I think we've been very particular on who we bring on. We don't have an extremely arduous interview process, but I think despite all the growth, and we've been very adamant on keeping our technical bar on the engineering side at kind of the level that we've had it from the beginning, which is we want to hire folks who are highly autonomous, take high ownership over the things that they work on, and are very technically gifted. And so we've stuck to our guns there, I think, despite always, as you're growing, there's some pressure to fill seats with bodies to help out. But we've been very particular about who we bring on. I think Sphere has a particular culture of customer obsession, of product obsession, of working hard, frankly. And we expect a lot from our employees. I think we give back a lot as well. But we've been particular. We think we're a small team for the size, the revenue that we're doing and the stage that we're at. We're a small team, not just on the engineering side, but across the company. And that's been very deliberate. We think that in this day and age, like the day and age of AI, there's much more you can get out of the same size of people compared to 5-10 years ago. And I think we really embrace that. That being said, we still hire aggressively and we're constantly looking at folks, but we really want folks who care about Sphere, care about the company. And especially at a startup, you need people who are willing to do what it takes to try and help the company succeed. I think there's a culture of no task is beneath anyone at the company, whether that's Nick, the founder, or me as head of engineering. We're happy to do whatever it takes for the company to succeed, and we're not worried about titles or hierarchy or anything like that.
This episode is sponsored by Mesmo. If you're responsible for reliability, performance, or platform architecture, you already know the problem. Telemetry volume is growing faster than teams can manage it. Mesmo addresses this by moving observability upstream. Instead of storing everything and asking questions later, Mesmo processes telemetry in motion, filtering, transforming, and enriching logs, metrics, and traces before they reach your observability backend. The result is cleaner data, reduced ingestion costs, and faster root cause analysis using the tools you already rely on. Mesmo integrates with platforms like Datadog, Dynatrace, and open source stacks, giving teams more control without adding operational overhead. This is especially useful for platform engineers and SREs supporting complex distributed systems where context and speed matter. To see how active telemetry works in practice, get a demo at mesmo.com/codestory. That's MEZMO.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by BrainGrid. Building with AI coding tools is exciting until the moment things start breaking. You ask for a small change and suddenly 3 other features stop working. AI gets confused, misses edge cases, and loses track of your intent. The problem is not code generation. The problem is planning. That is why BrainGrid exists. BrainGrid acts as your product management agent. It writes clear specification, maps UX flows, asks the clarifying questions you forgot to ask, and breaks big ideas into engineering-grade tasks that AI coding tools can build reliably. It guides Cursor, Claude Code, Replit, Windsurf, and others so they deliver features that work and keep working. Founders use BrainGrid to build real AI-native SaaS products without a technical background. If you want reliable features instead of fragile prototypes, try BrainGrid for free at braingrid.ai. That's braingrid.ai. Let's move into scalability, and this will be really interesting. This is in your space, in your bread and butter. How has scale been approached at Sphere? And I'm also curious, have there been interesting areas and interesting stories where you've had to fight scale as you've grown?
I think scale for us maybe means a couple of different things, especially in engineering. So one part of scale would be scale of requests coming in to our API. So we integrate with lots of billing systems, for example, Stripe. So we're a first-party integration with Stripe. Essentially, we're a drop-in replacement for their own tax solution. So you can very easily switch from Stripe tax to using Sphere. There's only a couple companies in the world that have this sort of thing. And that's been great for the business, obviously, but it also means that Stripe holds us to very high SLAs. Essentially, they hold us to the same SLAs they hold themselves, which they aim for 5+9s of availability, which for someone like Stripe, understandable, they're a big company and they should be hitting those sorts of things. For a startup, I think that's a big ask, and it's been a big ask, and we've had to work quite hard to hit those sorts of targets. But that's something that when we think about scalability, when we're thinking about our APIs, we're thinking about SLAs, right? We just can't have any downtime. Accompanying that comes the number of requests that are coming in. So as we're scaling the business, there's tens of thousands more requests per minute that are coming in. Every time we sign a big customer who's doing a lot of transactions, all of those transactions are going to result in multiple API requests to our API. So we're thinking about scale from that perspective. And I think we've done a good job from the beginning of choosing technological solutions that are able to scale with us in that. So we're using Kubernetes, we can spin up pods as we need them. And then on the other part of scale, I think for us, that would look like data volume. So we need to sync in all of our customers' transaction data, all of their historic transaction data, actually. That's obviously a huge amount of transaction data. As we bring on customers, there's tens of millions, hundreds of millions of transactions that need to be synced into our system. And we need to do that as quickly as possible. One of the ways that Sphere kind of sells itself above some of the competitors is how quick our onboarding process is. And part of onboarding, of course, is like syncing in the data that we need in order to finish the onboarding. And so we're thinking about scale from a database perspective as well, like a data volume perspective. How do we deal and process all of this data that we need to be syncing in as short of time as possible? And on the database side, we've been using AWS Aurora Postgres. And I think that served us very well. I think it was a wise decision when we switched over to using it pretty early on and has really scaled with the system. I think at some point we'll probably outgrow it, but for now it's been a fantastic solution. So I think we've been pretty forward looking, and it's somewhat easy to forecast. Like, we know our API requests are the number of them per second is gonna go up significantly over the next 6 months. So we're taking actions today to make sure that we're in a spot to support it. Same thing on the data volume side.
Okay, Alex, as you step out on the balcony and you look across all that you've built thus far at Sphere, what are you most proud of?
One thing for sure that I'm very proud of is TRAM, which we've talked about. One of the most gratifying parts of the job so far that really make the long nights or whatever worth it is when we bring new human tax researchers onto our team to work with TRAM. without fail, they have the same reaction as they start to use it. They're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This, I wish I would have had this 10 years ago. It would have saved me so much time. You all should sell licenses to this because I know 100 people from my network that would pay so much money to use something like this. So this has been, every time we get that feedback, it's just, you get the warm fuzzies inside and it makes you feel like you're doing something. You're really onto something that's really moving the needle on a process that is slow and archaic in other places. So I think that's been a really enjoyable part of it. I think another really enjoyable part has been the engineering team that we put together at Sphere. I think all of them are extremely talented. I think this is definitely the most talent-dense team I've ever been a part of. And despite being so technically gifted, it's been an amazing experience to work together as a group and really push yourself as a group to accomplish more than you thought was possible. And I think if you talk to each of the engineers on our team, they would echo that they thought that it was possible for them to accomplish a certain amount before they joined Sphere, and they've really been pushed beyond what they thought they could do. And it's really quite the experience to kind of go through that as a group and see everyone kind of grow and be able to take on more and do really incredible things, frankly, for as small of a team as we have. We're still around only 10 engineers to be supporting and building the sorts of things that we are. That's hugely gratifying, I think, especially for someone like me sitting where I am.
Okay, let's flip the script a little bit, Alex. Tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
This is a very tough industry. I mentioned before, it's always a moving target. Things can change based on legislation, things that are totally outside of your control. And I think we've certainly made mistakes from an engineering perspective, thinking about maybe like data models or the abstractions we're thinking about these problems. Those turned out to not be right because we didn't foresee that Singapore was going to have these certain rules that kind of don't fit into the box that we had built based on our abstractions or our data models. And so we need to backtrack a little bit. Or there's unexpected rules in Alabama for how something is taxed that doesn't fit cleanly into the abstractions that we made. And I think that those have been the major things where I think we get better at it every time we kind of run into one of these new cases that we haven't faced before, and we build a more extensible modular system. But those have been the main mistakes I think that we've seen. It's not around like choices of technology or anything like that. It's more around us as engineers. We don't have none of us are tax people, right? I started at Sphere and I didn't know anything about sales tax other than you see it on your checkout session when you're buying something. So we're all learning as we go and trying to learn from the human tax experts. And it's a very difficult space. There's a reason that no one has ever modeled a global solution to the sales tax, indirect tax problem. And so there's been plenty of mistakes we've made along the way that if I think back of some of the decisions we were making 12 months ago, I wish I could go back in time and kind of grab myself and be like, no, you haven't considered how this is going to work in Switzerland. And that's going to break the abstraction. So I think those have been the main mistakes, I think.
This episode is sponsored by Unblocked. Your coding agents have access to your code base. Maybe you even connected other tools via MCPs. But access doesn't mean context. Agents can't reason across MCPs. They don't know your architectural decisions, your team's patterns, or why the API was shaped the way it is. So agents look in the wrong place and deliver bad outputs. Then you spend time correcting. More loops, more tokens. Unblocked is the context layer your agents are missing. It synthesizes your PRs, docs, Slack, and tickets into organizational context that agents actually understand. So they make better plans, write higher quality code, use fewer tokens, and require fewer correction loops. If you're running Claude Code, Cursor, or any agentic workflow, Unblocked is worth a look. Learn more at getunblocked.com/codestory. So let's move forward then. This will be exciting. I know you joined this team because you're excited about what's being built. You've created some amazing things. Tell me about what the future looks like for Sphere, for the product, for where the industry is going, for your team, the company, all the things.
I think this is a very exciting time to be in the industry that we're in. Going back to an earlier question about what's been gratifying about this, I think that's been another thing that's been very gratifying is seeing changes around the world happening that make it even more important for businesses to be using a solution like Sphere. It makes you feel like you're really on the right track here. So an example of that would be e-invoicing. This is something we're adding support for. It's a new product feature for us. E-invoicing is essentially, there's many governments around the world where they're mandating that the government systems are essentially in the loop of transactions that are happening. So when you want to send an invoice to a customer, that needs to be sent through an e-invoicing system, which is like a government system, because the governments want real-time reporting of all the transactions that are happening in their jurisdiction. So this is like a burgeoning field, is just beginning, and we sit in a really good position. We're already connected to folks' billing systems. E-invoicing is you need to know the tax, so tax is very important for it as well. So adding support for e-invoicing is something that we're already working on rolling out, but will take some time to support across all of the countries we support from the sales tax side. We also have our eye on tariffs, for example. We have all of our customers' product SKU catalog data, and tariffs are a form of tax. That tax depends on the type of good, and that is very similar, of course, to the way sales tax operates. And so we're looking to support folks from the tariffs perspective. And then maybe the one other feature set that we're looking at right now as well is what's called input tax. So internationally, you can reclaim some of the tax you pay on your purchases as a business, which of course is very interesting to our customers because it lowers your tax bill. So it's money that goes back in their pocket. So they're very interested in making sure they get their input tax right. And that's this ultimate play that we're looking at is really outside of just sales tax. Even on the sales tax side, there's no global solution just for sales tax before Sphere, but we're not resting on our laurels there. We have much broader plans. We have bigger TAMs that we want to eat into. We'd like to eat significantly into the TAM that people pay the big four accounting firms for. And that's today people pay them for things like e-invoicing and input tax. They pay a lot of money to these firms, and we think a lot of it could be a software solution. And we think Sphere is perfectly placed to take advantage of these changing regulations and serve our customers and make it as easy to sell. This tagline that we repeat sometimes, we want to make the world one market. It should be as easy to sell in California as it is to sell in Germany or Nigeria. It shouldn't matter for you as the owner of a business. You should be able to just sell your products to whoever wants to buy them.
Let's switch to you, Alex. Who influences the way that you work? Name a person or many persons or something you look up to and why.
There's been a lot of people in my career that have shaped the way that I work, the way that I approach problems, whether those are technical or personal problems like building the team out, personnel problems. But I think if I think back to the beginning of my career, I worked at a company called Mozenda at the beginning of my career, and I worked for someone there named Caleb. Like anyone at the beginning of my career, I didn't understand how things worked. I wasn't sure how to be a great employee. I wasn't sure how to make a big impact on a team. And I think he really enabled me to understand those sorts of things. How do I sniff out what's most important for the business, right? What's going to have the highest impact? How do I do the things and build the teams that are going to help hit the goals that the business has made? And so thinking back, I think Caleb is really up there. In fact, a business that I founded later on, I founded it with him. So I think he's had a really outsized effect on me. And then jumping forward, maybe I've been working with Nick, the founder of Sphere, for a couple of years now. And I think he's had a very big impact as well. I think Nick is very focused. He's relentless in the way that he approaches problems. So I think I've never seen someone quite like Nick before in the way that they see a problem and then just attack it, beat it into submission, so to speak. Just what's the problem? How do we solve it? How do we move forward? What's good for our customers? If I think back 2 years before I joined Sphere, I think that was a muscle I didn't have nearly as much. And I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to do, is to be able to see a problem for what it truly is, make a plan for how we're going to solve it, and then not, relentlessly attack that problem until it's no longer a problem, it's actually a strength. And I think that honestly is the story of Sphere, is we see our weaknesses and we turn those into strengths. And we've done that over and over again. And if you keep doing it, then in any case, you're going to build an incredible business. And I think that's what we've been doing.
Okay, Alex, last question. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. And can we show it off to you right there on the plane? What advice do you give that person, having gone down this road a bit?
I think my main point of advice would be to chase the dream, continue to chase the dream that had brought them to that point. Obviously, building a product, especially building like the MVP of a product, is one thing, but then building a business around it is another thing. And I think sometimes it's easy for founders to lose track of what was the original dream that they had when they set out and started building. What was the real point of the product, or what was it really that motivated them to do this incredibly hard thing, which is building something out of nothing. Looking back on my career, that would be the main advice I could give, is just to never forget what was that original thing that pushed you to do it, and how do you keep serving that instead of serving other things that might be trying to steal your attention or your time or your focus, or pull the product in ways that you hadn't thought. How do you stay true to the original vision? All the successes in startups or in my career I've seen, it's always been remaining true to that core principle of what you set off to do.
I think that's fantastic advice. Well, Alex, thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for telling your creation story at Sphere.
Yeah, thank you, Noah.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Capital One's tech team isn't just talking about multi-agentic AI. They already deployed one. It's called Chat Concierge, and it's simplifying car shopping. Using self-reflection and layered reasoning with live API checks, it doesn't just help buyers find a car they love. It helps schedule a test drive, get pre-approved for financing, and estimate trade-in value. Advanced, intuitive, and deployed. That's how they stack. That's technology at Capital One.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.